The nightmare begins in fire and screams. You open your eyes to a sky painted black with smoke, curling like crooked fingers that claw the heavens. The air tastes of burning timber and flesh, thick and choking, each breath scraping your throat like ash ground to glass. Around you, the village collapses. Thatched roofs crackle, beams groan, and the homes of generations buckle into flame. You do not hear voices anymore, only shrieks broken off mid-cry, and the heavy, wet sound of axes striking what is softer than wood. Death has a rhythm, and tonight it plays through every alley, every door, every bed. The men fall first. They do not die like warriors from sagas. They die like livestock, throats ripped open as if parchment torn down the middle, spilling stories that no one will remember. You see a father stagger to protect his child, only to be split in half, his blood spraying against walls already blackened. A son runs, stumbling barefoot on stone, his skull crushed beneath iron. The ground becomes slick beneath your feet, and you taste copper in the air as if the soil itself is bleeding. But you do not fall. You remain. Not because of mercy, but because your suffering is the point. Survival is not a gift. It is a sentence. While the men's lives are stolen in seconds, your existence is prolonged, twisted, held in cruel hands like a torch meant to burn slower. You feel rough fingers seize you, not to lift you from ruin but to claim you. Your body trembles, your mind screams, yet no voice emerges. To survive is to be marked, to become the canvas upon which conquest paints itself. You see the others, the wives, the daughters, dragged into the dirt. Their faces are streaked with soot and tears, their hair tangled with embers that still glow. Some struggle, clawing, biting, shrieking. Others collapse, paralyzed by terror. None are spared. Around you, the raiders' laughter is jagged, cruel, like wolves gnawing bone. They do not hide their hunger. They savor it. The humiliation is heavier than chains. To be left alive while those you loved are butchered is to be transformed from mourner into trophy. You stand among corpses and flame, not as a survivor but as evidence. Proof that the conqueror has taken not only land, but the breath and blood of its women. The fire paints shadows on your skin, and you realize you are no longer human in their eyes. You are spoil. You are silence waiting to be filled with their will. Your knees weaken as you stumble across the courtyard where you once fetched water. The well is overturned, bodies piled beside it. Blood flows like a river across the dirt, seeping into the cracks of wood, into the soil that once fed harvests. Children cry somewhere behind the flames, only to be silenced in a heartbeat. Every sound ends abruptly here, as if swallowed by an invisible throat. In this moment you begin to understand. Death was not the end of your people. Death was only the curtain pulled back to reveal something worse. The men's screams fade quickly, carried away by smoke, but yours will linger. You will carry humiliation on your skin, in your womb, in your silence. The conquerors do not want you dead. They want you broken, alive enough to suffer, alive enough to remember. The village burns, but it is not the fire that consumes you. It is the certainty that when the flames collapse into embers, you will remain. Bound in silence, drenched in your husband's blood, you are dragged toward a fate sharpened like a blade, waiting just beyond the ashes. And when the screams finally die, the true terror begins, the silence.
When the fire dies, the silence that follows is not peace, it is possession. You stand amidst smoldering ruins where once there was laughter, where once there was prayer, where once there was the familiar music of daily life. Now only embers breathe, glowing faintly like eyes watching you from the ash. The raiders herd you and the others together, pressing you into a line of trembling bodies. There are no words spoken, for no words are needed. Silence is command, silence is humiliation. Silence is ownership. You are no longer seen as a woman, nor even as a captive. You are reduced to wound, a breathing scar that testifies to their power. Chains bite into your wrists, the iron cutting skin raw. Yet the heavier chains coil beneath the skin, wrapping around your soul. Shame drips like a poison, seeping into every corner of thought. You feel the collapse of everything sacred. Love reduced to mockery, faith drowned beneath the roar of conquest, grief denied the dignity of mourning. Where once you would weep for your dead, you are not permitted even that. The conqueror steals even your tears as if sorrow itself must be taxed. You look around, and in the eyes of the other wives you see your own reflection. Wide, hollow, broken. They too are dragged as spoils, not mourners but trophies. Their bodies shake in silence, their dignity trampled under boots, their identities peeled away layer by layer. Each woman once had a name whispered by someone who loved her. Each name is now dissolving, melting away in the fire's afterglow, erased not only from memory but from existence. To speak them would be rebellion. To remember them is forbidden. The Vikings enslave more than flesh. They enslave memory. They unweave the tapestry of family, cutting loose every thread that held life together. Husbands reduced to corpses, children scattered or slain, wives transformed into tokens of victory. You feel it as a slow erasure, not a sudden death. Each step you take into their camp is a step away from who you were, a step into the suffocating silence that remakes you into nothing but their conquest-given form. The camp itself becomes a theater of dread. Fires smolder, meat roasts, laughter bellows into the night air. To them, your presence is proof of triumph. To you, it is the edge of a grave that never closes. They strip away your identity not by killing you but by keeping you alive. Alive to remember, alive to bear, alive to suffer. Death would have been clean. This is contamination, slow and unrelenting. You are forced into their rhythm. Every gesture, every command, every movement you make is no longer your own. The conqueror dictates how you walk, how you kneel, how you breathe. You are not human, you are extension, echo, reflection of their victory. Your body no longer belongs to itself but to the saga of those who destroyed everything you knew. You are not allowed to be a widow mourning the slain. You are transformed into a symbol, a breathing mockery of the love you once held. And the silence, oh the silence, it is heavier than screams. Screams can be heard, can be remembered, can leave echoes. Silence swallows all sound, all protest, all memory. It eats the soul. You realize the cruelty was never the fire, never the axe, never even the blood. The cruelty is this silence, smothering, endless, unrecorded. You carry dishonor like a second skin, pressed onto you until you cannot tell where it ends and where you begin. Death could never have inflicted this weight. Only survival, twisted and hollow, can give birth to this kind of shame. And as you sit in chains, the night presses down upon you, whispering of what comes next, when silence gives way to the darkest invasion of all. Now begins the cruelty that cannot be spoken without trembling. The bed-turned battlefield, the place where conquest does not end but burrows deeper. You are pulled into a chamber of shadows, a darkness that mocks every memory of love you once knew. The air is thick with the smell of sweat, iron, and smoke from dying torches, and the walls seem to lean in close, suffocating, as if even the stone wishes not to witness what follows. Here, victory is not declared with axes or fire, but with hands that seize, mouths that defile, and flesh that becomes another ground upon which wars are waged. You, widow of a fallen man, are forced into a parody of intimacy. Touch becomes desecration, every movement a violation that stains not only skin but spirit. What once was gentle, fingers that once held your face, lips that once spoke your name, is now twisted into weapons sharper than any blade. You are pinned, trapped, suffocated in the grotesque mimicry of love. A kiss becomes an assault, an embrace becomes a shackle, and the bed where life was once created becomes the grave of everything sacred. Each act forced upon you is more than violence. It is inscription. It is the conqueror writing his saga into your body, making you unwilling scripture to his victory. Your womb, once belonging to the man who loved you, becomes an altar, desecrated, profaned, repurposed as a vessel for the legacy of the one who murdered him. You are rewritten, erased, overwritten like a text scraped clean and carved again with foreign words. The pain is not only of flesh, but of memory, of identity, of love defiled. The grotesque horror lies not in the act alone, but in its meaning. Intimacy, once the language of trust, is twisted into the grammar of conquest. The body becomes territory, kisses become chains, embraces become prisons. You feel it not only in your skin but in your marrow, as though the violence seeps into the deepest part of you, poisoning the place where hope once dwelled. The cruelty grows heavier in its silence. No one will speak of this. No saga will name you. The chroniclers will write of ships, of axes, of victories sung in ale halls, but they will not write of you, the widow turned spoil, the wife transformed into the possession of her husband's killer. Your suffering is not considered history, only shadow, only silence. Yet it is here, in this stolen bedroom, that the truest battlefield lies, more merciless than fields soaked in blood. You realize with suffocating clarity that no sword strike could wound as deeply as this desecration. Death would have been final, but this cruelty lingers, repeating itself night after night, until even memory collapses. It is not only your body that has been claimed, it is your grief, your loyalty, your sacred bonds torn apart and nailed into a grotesque display of power. And as the torches gutter low, as the walls echo with laughter outside, you feel yourself dissolve into something hollow, something unrecognizable. You are no longer wife, no longer widow. You are trophy, you are conquest, you are the silence in which this cruelty festers. And from this silence rises a darker truth still. What is taken from you does not end with you. It seeps forward into futures, into children, into bloodlines yet unborn. Here the philosophy of horror sharpens, cutting deeper than the blade that slaughtered your husband. You begin to understand that conquest does not end with the burning of homes, nor with the desecration of bodies. No, the truest victory is written in the future, in the wombs of the conquered. The Vikings do not simply take women for fleeting pleasure. They take them as instruments, as forges where new bloodlines are cast. They do not merely silence the dead. They drown entire legacies in the cries of children born not of love but of violation. You feel this truth settle into your bones like frost. Your body, once a vessel of love, of continuity, of sacred bond, becomes a grotesque battlefield of inheritance. Within you grows not healing, not remembrance, but erasure. You are transformed into a forge where the enemy hammers his triumph into flesh and blood, branding his victory onto the very future of your people. The womb, once sanctified by devotion, now becomes a grave for the bloodline of your slain husband. Every quickening heartbeat inside you, every breath of life yet unborn, whispers not of your lineage but of theirs. The imagery is unbearable. You see mothers rocking infants whose faces resemble the killers of their fathers. You hear lullabies sung with trembling voices, not out of joy but as a ritual of survival, songs choking in the throats of women who know the truth. Their own blood has been diluted, drowned, eclipsed. A child's laughter becomes the cruelest echo of conquest, a reminder that even innocence has been stolen, reshaped, and weaponized. You look upon your belly as if it were a tombstone. Each movement within feels less like life and more like burial. Your body has become a grave marker, carrying forward the erasure of your people. It is not enough that your husband lies rotting in the earth. His legacy must be extinguished from the veins of the living, replaced by the seed of his enemy. This is conquest not of land, not of bodies, but of memory itself. And what is memory if not the thread that binds identity? When that thread is severed, you see generations vanish before they are even born. Sons who will never resemble their fathers. Daughters who will never inherit the songs of their mothers. Blood diluted until it carries no trace of what was once sacred. The conqueror writes himself into every cradle, every lullaby, every lineage, ensuring that centuries later, the silence of your people will remain unbroken. The existential weight suffocates you. You are no longer fighting for survival. Survival itself has become the weapon against you. To live is to betray unwillingly the blood of the man you loved. To bear life is to deliver death to your lineage. The grotesque irony consumes you. Your body, once celebrated as the bringer of continuity, has been weaponized into the executioner of continuity itself. Every child becomes a reminder. Each innocent gaze, each small hand reaching toward you, becomes an echo of conquest. You cannot hate them, they are blameless. But their very existence is proof that you have been overwritten, erased, transformed into the vessel of someone else's story. You love them and you despise them because through them you have lost everything. And so the horror deepens from the tearing of flesh into the tearing of time itself. Conquest has written itself not only upon your body but into the veins of the future. What was once your people is now gone, dissolved into silence, replaced by the blood of those who conquered you. The tragedy is no longer simply personal, it is existential. From this abyss of understanding, hopelessness begins to spread. The wives, once bound in chains, now find themselves bound by destiny itself. There is no undoing what has been done, no reclaiming what has been lost. The future has been stolen, and you are left as nothing more than the hollow vessel that carried it. And from this realization begins the collapse, the hollowing of the soul. At this stage, the horror ceases to scream. It no longer claws with bloodied hands or shrieks through burning rafters. Instead, it crawls inward, coiling inside your chest, seeping into marrow, turning every beat of your heart into a hollow echo. You no longer resist. You no longer beg. You no longer even weep. Resistance burns bright and fast, but you, like a candle snuffed in the wind, collapse into smoke, into nothing. The grotesque transformation begins. Grief, once sharp enough to tear your throat raw, dulls into numbness, a silence more terrifying than pain. You sink into yourself, a descent that feels endless. Around you, the camp is alive with feasting, laughter, the stench of meat roasting. The conquerors revel, and every sound of their joy pierces you more cruelly than a blade. A laugh is not a laugh. It is an echo that drills through your skull, reverberating like mockery, like a reminder that your suffering is their entertainment. Every cheer is a nail in the coffin of who you once were. You see other women beside you, and they too have collapsed into silence. Their eyes stare outward but reveal nothing within, as if the soul has fled and left behind only husks. They walk, they obey, they carry burdens, but they are not alive. They are tombs that breathe, carrying invisible scars etched deeper than any wound. History will never write these scars, will never carve them into stone. No chronicler will record the living deaths endured here. Silence will cover it all like snow burying unmarked graves. When a child is born of this conquest, it is not joy that fills the air but dread. To cradle such a child is to cradle betrayal, a ghost whispering from the future. You cannot hate them, they are innocent, but you cannot love them without tasting ashes. Their existence is proof of your hollowing, proof that your body was turned into soil where another man's legacy was planted. Each infant laugh haunts, each breath carries the weight of conquest. They become phantoms, innocent yet unbearable, shadows clinging to your ribs. The violence itself was cruel, but what follows is more suffocating. For pain is sharp, but it passes. Numbness does not. It lingers like rot in the walls of your soul. You become incapable of love, incapable of hope. Your own reflection in water startles you. You no longer recognize the eyes staring back. Where once there was fire, now there is vacancy. You are not dead, yet you are not alive. You are something in between, a hollow shell that moves because it must, breathes because it cannot stop, endures because even death has been stolen from you. This is the breaking point. The horror is no longer in the acts themselves but in their aftermath, in the erasure of self. The conquerors do not only destroy your body, they dismantle your identity, strip away your humanity, and replace it with emptiness. What they leave behind is a silence more enduring than screams, more haunting than corpses. You begin to wonder if this was always the truest form of conquest. Not the slaughter, not the rape, but the transformation of a living soul into an empty tomb. A woman who no longer belongs to herself, who no longer belongs to her dead, who no longer belongs even to memory. This is the conquest of the spirit, the annihilation of the inner flame. And as the camp roars with drunken celebration, as shadows dance against firelight, you sit in silence, neither alive nor dead, only hollow. The weight of despair presses like stone upon your chest. And from this suffocating silence, the nightmare prepares to drag you deeper, toward the grotesque climax, where tragedy ceases to be yours alone and becomes the unbearable truth of all who were taken. The hall is thick with smoke, thick with sweat, thick with the foul joy of the conquerors. Torches spit fire into the air, shadows stretch long against the walls, and you, along with the others, are dragged into the spectacle. You are no longer women, no longer mourners, no longer even prisoners. You are offerings displayed like slaughtered animals dressed in flesh that still breathes. Some are forced to dance, their steps stumbling, their tears gleaming in the torchlight like jewels no one values. Others are ordered to pour ale into waiting mouths, trembling hands spilling more than they serve, punished for every drop wasted. And some are paraded openly, stripped of dignity, raised up as trophies to remind the drunken hall that conquest is not complete until the defeated are remade into grotesque entertainment. The air vibrates with music, drums pounded by calloused hands, horns blaring, voices roaring in a storm of intoxication. Yet beneath the noise you hear the low hum of despair, the muted breathing of women breaking in silence. For the conquerors, this is a feast of shadows. The men they slaughtered are forgotten, their ashes scattered in the wind, but their wives are here, proof that victory has bled into every vein of life. You feel it in your skin, in your bones, humiliation sharpened into theater, suffering turned into laughter. Every movement you make feeds their triumph. Every breath you take confirms your erasure. You feel yourself dissolving as if your body is not flesh but smoke drifting in their firelit hall. You look around and the others too are dissolving, faces blurred by despair, limbs reduced to motions without will. You become less than human, less even than prisoner. You become shadow. A shadow that dances on the wall, insubstantial, forgotten the moment the torch guttered out. A shadow that can be commanded, used, erased, and never mourned. The grotesque image sharpens. Each wife is no longer her own, but a wound displayed in the open, a symbol that the fallen men have been humiliated not once, but twice, slain in body, then mocked through the desecration of their women. This is conquest perfected. Men destroyed on the battlefield, women destroyed in the aftermath, the very idea of love, kinship, and memory obliterated before the eyes of a roaring crowd. You are not only victim, you are weapon used against the dead who can no longer defend you. The hall reeks of spilled ale, of roasted flesh, of unwashed bodies pressed together in drunken rapture. Yet what suffocates most is not the stench but the weight of invisibility. You are seen but not recognized, displayed but not remembered, consumed but not mourned. This is the collapse of the soul. The moment you realize there is nothing left to hold on to, not name, not dignity, not memory, you are dissolving into nothingness, becoming only a shadow in their saga, your story rewritten as their victory. The laughter grows louder, the music faster, the shadows wilder. And you, trapped among them, feel the last fragments of yourself slipping away. You close your eyes, but even darkness does not save you. It echoes with their voices, their jeers, their drunken howls. You open them again and see only the reflection of your hollow face in the ale spilled on the floor. You are fading, dissolving into the cracks of history, a presence without a voice, a suffering without a record. This is the suffocation at its peak, the nightmare gathered into one unbearable moment. The transformation of living women into hollow symbols, their agony transfigured into entertainment, their humanity lost in the blaze of conquest celebration. And in this suffocation, the audience feels it too, that there is no deeper pit, no greater collapse, no heavier silence. Yet from this very abyss, from this pit where shadows consume all light, something else begins to stir. Not escape, not hope, but reflection. A question quiet and searing. What does it mean for humanity when the suffering of women is not only endured but erased, when history itself chooses to forget?
Centuries pass, and the fires that once consumed villages are long since ash. The screams that once tore through the night dissolve into silence, carried away by winds that no longer remember. The sagas are written, men's battles carved into stone, their deaths sung with pride, their names sealed into memory like iron into earth. Warriors who struck and fell are immortalized, their violence lifted into the realm of legend. But where are the wives? Where are the women who endured not a single moment of death, but lifetimes of desecration? You search the pages, the monuments, the songs, and you find only silence. Here lies the grotesque truth. History itself has conspired in their erasure. The ink of memory chooses only swords, not wombs. It preserves the clang of steel, not the muffled sob in a raider's bed. It elevates the blood spilled in battle but refuses to acknowledge the quieter, deeper bloodlines broken in secret. What was endured in the shadowed corners of conquest is left to rot, unnamed, as though it never existed. This is cruelty sharpened to its final edge. Not merely the suffering itself, but the obliteration of its memory. You stand at the edge of forgotten graves, the earth thick with silence. No marker, no stone, no name. Only soil that hides bones once alive with love, once broken with grief. The ground is heavy with untold stories, pressed down until even the memory of their screams has been smothered. It is here, in the quiet weight of the earth, that you realize the cruelest fate was never the violence. It was the oblivion. To suffer and be erased is to die twice. Once in body, once in memory. The sagas sing of raids, of ships with dragon prows slicing across the sea, of men who bled in the glory of conquest. Yet no saga tells of the women bound in chains, of the wombs turned into tombs, of the children born of silence and shame. These wives were paraded in halls, forced to serve, forced to bear. But history has stripped even that truth away. What remains is not their voice, but their absence, a hollow that echoes beneath every carved name of a hero. This silence is not passive, it is chosen. Humanity has chosen to remember the swords but forget the wombs, to honor the men who killed and dismiss the women who endured. The tragedy is not only in the acts of the Vikings, but in the centuries that followed, in the chroniclers who turned away, in the poets who refused to sing, in the historians who clipped their pens before writing the truth. Each omission is another blow, another act of erasure, another burial of what was already buried. You feel the haunting weight of this conspiracy, as though the very soil pulls at your feet, demanding recognition, demanding witness. These women do not rise in stone statues, do not whisper through songs, do not live in memory. They survive only as shadows, half seen in the margins, erased from the center. And so their suffering lingers not as history, but as haunting, as something unresolved, festering in silence. This is the final cruelty, not death, not desecration, but the certainty of being forgotten. To know that your body was broken, your lineage erased, your love stolen, and then to know that none of it will be remembered, none of it honored, none of it given meaning. The sagas of men drown their screams, the stones of glory crush their whispers. And so the burden shifts, no longer suffocation but reflection. A haunting reflection that presses on the soul. How does humanity decide what is worthy of memory? What moral rot festers when we choose to immortalize bloodshed and bury suffering? You feel it closing in, the realization that history itself is complicit, that the silence of centuries is not emptiness but betrayal. The documentary closes not with screams but with silence. A silence so heavy it feels like stone pressing against your chest. A silence that is not absence but suffocation. Death is loud, blood gushes, bones crack, fires roar, but forgetting is quieter, crueler. You, the forgotten wife, lie beneath nameless soil, and the earth does not whisper your name. No monument rises. No saga dares to sing. You are buried twice, once in flesh, once in memory, and that second burial is eternal. Your body once carried conquest, not willingly but violently inscribed into the victor's story. Your womb bore the lineage of your enemies, your tears watered their victories, your humiliation became the mortar of their empires. And yet, in the cruel symmetry of history, even this is erased. The conquerors remembered their ships, their swords, their battles. The conquered remembered their fallen men, their broken walls, their burned homes. But you, the wound that bled without end, were remembered by no one. This is the grotesque paradox. You bore the weight of humiliation and still history turned its face away. The silence is not neutral, it is chosen. To erase you was to preserve glory, to keep the story of conquest clean, unsullied by the screams of women who carried the true horror. Men's deaths could be honored. Your survival, desecrated, could not. And so the centuries decided, better to forget. Imagine the viewer standing now above that nameless soil. No flowers, no marker, only dirt compacted over centuries of rain and roots. They feel the weight beneath their feet, the weight of all the silenced wives who suffered in shadows, who were consumed and then erased. The wind moves, but it carries no song, only silence. And yet that silence presses harder than 1,000 screams. It asks not for pity, but for remembrance. It demands that the void be named. Every empire has its shadows. Behind every triumphal march, every carved rune, every stone monument, there is a hollow where women's stories should be. The shadows lengthen across time, and inside them lie you and countless others, silenced, unnamed, unwept. The grotesque truth is that the world we now inhabit was not built only by warriors' hands or kings' decrees, but by women's pain, absorbed and then discarded like ash in wind. You begin to see it. The architecture of history itself is haunted. The walls of cities hold not just stone, but unmarked suffering. The songs of victory carry beneath their notes the hidden rhythm of despair. The lineage of nations carries in its veins blood mixed by force, shame passed from womb to child, generation to generation. And still silence, always silence. The nightmare leaves the viewer haunted. For the true horror of history is not merely bloodshed, but forgetting. Not the axe's swing, but the silence that follows. Not the fire's roar, but the ash that buries all trace. Forgetting is the slowest cruelty, the one that continues even now as centuries pass, as screens flicker, as voices try to recall what was meant to be erased. And so the final reflection turns like a blade. You, the viewer, cannot walk away clean. You carry this silence now. You carry the weight of women erased by conquest, by design, by indifference. Their suffering has no end, for erasure is endless. The silence does not conclude with the film. It seeps outward into your memory, into your conscience, into history itself. The nightmare ends, but the silence does not.